Hello everybody, welcome to Nostalgia Goggles. I'm Cass, the Retro Gaming Nerd, and here we are again at an awkward episode, because my show is Does a Game Hold Up? And today's a weird one because we're talking about a game that I love a lot, and I feel like the answer's very obvious, but you never know. With the game that we're talking about today, which is Devil May Cry, it's a game that is kind of old now, right? It's a super awesome game, and it's one that's near and dear to my heart, but I do kind of have to ask, with how many clones of it, and even soul successors, can we call Bayonetta a soul successor? Let's say that it's kind of a successor to it. Devil May Cry is still a franchise, I believe. They're doing a Netflix show quite recently, and there's a possibility of a new one, but it still has to ask the question of, is the first one still worth playing today? After all, 3 did kind of rock the boat in a major way. And it's worth asking the question if it holds up, despite the fact that it hurts me so much. With that being said, let's get right into it. So when it gets right down to it, in the grand scheme of everything, Devil May Cry is a hard game to talk about, especially coming at the first one, due to the fact that the way that these games are released and the way that the narrative is told is odd. The game's original story starts in 3, so whatever I say here is going to sound kind of like nonsense or just kind of boring nothing, right? Because I feel like the narrative makes more sense and feels better if you start with 3, but you don't have to play 3 to understand what's going on, because really, basically, you play as a demon hunter named Dante, which is looking for revenge on a demon named Mundus or Mundus. I don't know how to pronounce his name. It's pronounced differently in games. So if you know it, put it in the comment section below. But you are looking for revenge, but you cannot find this demon. Luckily, a lady named Trish busts through your business with a motorcycle and attacks you and tells you she knows where this demon is. So she takes you to a castle where he resides, and now it is your job to get revenge on him for your family that he demolished. And that's pretty much all I want to say about the game, because that's really it. The story itself works out very well, and I like the reveals that come along with it. It makes better sense, like I said at the beginning, if you've played the other games, and it hits really well if you've played the other games, specifically 3. So I would recommend to play 3 first. I know that sounds weird, but like, definitely give 3 a try before you go into this one. It's not necessary though. I played this game initially back in the day, but way before 3 was a thing. So, I don't know. I enjoyed it. I thought it was a good story. It's one that I feel like you kind of gotta roll with a little bit, because like, it's one that confidently tells itself, so you don't feel like you're missing anything. And argumentatively, I'd argue most of the time you don't need to play other DMC games. We'll get along with it. Like, there's a few, like I'd argue 5, you need to definitely play 4 and the others. 4, I think you can start there technically, but that's a whole nother story. It's getting completely off topic. All in all, I feel like the story is good for this game, but I don't think it relies on it too much. All you need to know is that you have family that you're avenging. That's really it. And I think that with that being said, I think that is fine. Most of this game realistically runs off of its combat. So like, I don't know. I like the story, but it's not the thing that I feel like, especially in this one, you're coming for. So with that being said, I think the story did a good job. Let's move on to the gameplay. When it gets right down to it, the gameplay for Devil May Cry is wildly interesting, because it is one of the firsts in a franchise that I don't feel like I have to apologize for. You see, the gameplay is as fresh as day one, but due to the fact that Devil May Cry only improves upon itself as a franchise, except for one game, which is the second one, it feels like it's cohesive and consistent, right? Devil May Cry 1, 3, and so on and so forth feel like games that all play very similarly. The only real difference is the gameplay gets improved upon, and that's what I feel like is great. This game, from its weapon selection to its gameplay itself to just really the boss fights and many other stuff, it feels like a really good game, and it feels like a game that you can play today without apology. A lot of video games from their beginning are rough, and I don't think this one feels that way. This one feels fresh, and I think that that's great. So with that being said though, I do think that there are some definite issues with the gameplay. One of them being the fact that the camera kinda sucks within this game. It takes after Resident Evil. And that makes sense because apparently this was kind of at one point meant to be a Resident Evil game. Obviously it didn't be that way. And realistically, that's not even important either. I would have known that information if it wasn't told through the internet multiple times, but you can definitely see those influences because the camera works like a Resident Evil game, and that does become a detriment for some boss fights, and that does become a detriment throughout the game sometimes, but I don't think it's enough to change anything. It just, sometimes a boss is harder to hit, or sometimes you're missing out on something because you can't control the camera, but I don't think it's that big of a deal because the game kind of seems to understand that too, right? It's only one or two times that comes to mind. Outside of that, I think that the game is as fresh as it could have been, and that's outstanding. Normally, like I said prior, for the first game, I have to make a lot of apologies, but this one I do not, and I think that that's outstanding. With that being said, let's move on to the presentation. When it comes down to the presentation of Devil May Cry itself, it is outstanding once again. I absolutely love how this one stands out from the others. Devil May Cry is a franchise that has a distinct look from game to game to game to game to game. So I think that this one being in the castle helps it be definitely unique. And with it being in a castle, there was kind of a fear initially while playing this game that it would get stagnant, but it never does due to the fact that it being in a castle, they play with multiple rooms, they play with you going outside, they play with you being on a ship for a couple seconds. They constantly shift and change where you are, and I think that that's great. You do definitely get to explore more of it. You kind of go back and forth, kind of once again Resident Evil feeling with the Spencer Mansion, of where you are in a mansion, but you can kind of go back and forth and you end up coming back to places, and I think that that's really great. I think that that works out very well. Another thing that works out very well for me is the enemies design and the monster design. You aren't dealing with just one monster. It could have really been that way. Some video games do that, but this one deals with multiple monsters like puppets, lizard things, and you know, shadow creatures, and I really enjoy that. There's other monsters as well, and I enjoy how they look, I enjoy how unique they are, I enjoy how distinct they are, and I like how even with the puppets they're varied because they have different weapons. Some have shotguns, some have knives, some have other types of weapons, some puppets are even different, like, you know, spewing fire and so on and so forth. This game just does a really good job, and also it looks great to this day. One of the scenes that I like to refer to that blew my mind back then and still does to this day is there is a pre-rendered window that looks so good today even. But I think even then the game feels like it's great even regardless. Yes, I feel like, as I probably will say in the story, that there is a little bit of wonkiness in voice acting, but that was just of the time. And even then, I can't say that either because some of the voice acting and some of the quotes and stuff are reused in Bayonetta. Fight me on that one, but you can see Bayonetta actually doing similar things to Dante, like with the giant spider, and she taps on it, I believe with the back of her hand, where Dante does the same to the giant spider boss. And, you know, the flock off feather brain thing is here too. But I think that that's what's really cool, is that there's that carryover, right? And I think really this game oozes with aesthetic as well, right? Like Dante's aesthetic is dope. The aesthetic of the monsters is dope. Everything's dope. All in all, this game oozes with presentation, even down to the music. The music is kind of sparse in this game. Like, it's most of the time the music you'll hear is the battle theme, and I think it's great. It's not annoying. I can see where people say it is, but it's not. And the music that it has feels very atmospheric, and I think that that's what really works out. All in all, when it comes down to how it works out, I think the presentation is just great. With that being said, let's move on to accessibility. So when it gets right down to it, Devil May Cry is very accessible because there are many collections. But let's start with the first release of this game, Devil May Cry for the PS2. That one will cost you $5 and up. I believe that you can find this game for even less than that, but $5 is realistically where you get it for. I've seen it also at the highest go for $20 to $60. It is such an odd range that I don't know exactly where to put it. but I feel like realistically, if you're looking for this game, $5 is reasonable for the PlayStation 2 version. With that being said, there is an anniversary edition, the 5th anniversary edition, which will set you back $40 and then some as well, once again being consistently priced. The highest I've seen it go for is $60, but I don't exactly know if I'd pay that much for it, especially since there's an HD collection and there's 2 versions of that. There's the PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360 versions, which will set you back about $12, and then there is the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One version of the game, which will set you back about $19. And then there's the Switch version of this game, which will set you back $30 to $40. I haven't really fiddled with that one, so I don't know how that one runs or anything, and that's not really what this segment's about. But if I could recommend one version of the game, I think the more modern Xbox or PlayStation version of the games, due to the fact that the price isn't over the roof. I think that 30 is a little much, but I think 20 is reasonable, and I also think having it on more modern hardware is reasonable as well. If you can find it for $5 for the PlayStation, go for it, but I wouldn't pay much more than that at the end of the day. The best way I think I would recommend going for it, like I said, is the PlayStation version, but maybe the 5th anniversary if you insist on playing these games on the PS2. That would be the way to go, because at least you're getting all the games at once for $40. Reasonable. So, with that being said, let's move on to the goods and the bads. Devil May Cry is a very influential game, and you can totally see why it is from this one alone. It definitely feels like it changed the genre of how beat-em-ups are, because I would argue at one point this would have been just a 3D beat-em-up, and that's what they would have called it, but it just kind of isn't that. It's more than that. And I think that Devil May Cry's influence is just amazing, and I think that even then, outside of its influence, I think that it's just an amazing game, and it's crazy that Devil May Cry 1 still holds up to this day as well as it does, because as I said in the gameplay segment, it's very hard to find a video game's first outing that you do not have to apologize for. And I think that that's what's great. Another thing that's great about this game is something I forgot to mention in gameplay, is that you are able to upgrade yourself from weapons to health to whatever, and that actually kind of can cause the difficulty to change, and I think that that's great. If you want to, you don't have to upgrade your health, you don't have to upgrade your devil trigger, and I think that that's cool that they give you that option. And I think that realistically, all in all, this game just does an amazing job at being a first game. So all in all, I think that this game is an amazing first outing. I don't think I can stress that enough. I think that the presentation is also great. I feel like everything about this game is great, and it's what a first game should aspire to be, where there is some things that you can definitely fix, yes, but those things are so minor that they will not affect, I think, the gameplay, and will not affect your opinion on the game. With that being said, no game is perfect, so let's move on to the bads. From the camera angling to the awkward platforming, I think that this game does have minor issues like that. But that's really where I feel like it lies, right? Because Devil May Cry, like I said, and I've been saying, is a great start to the franchise. And I feel like those two issues kind of go hand in hand, right? Some of the platforming feels odd because of the camera angling sometimes, and that makes sense, right? Because when you're platforming, you kind of want to see where you're platforming. But in reality, the game doesn't do too much of platforming. The biggest issue is camera angling, but once again, that's really... It comes down to two issues. One, it was of the time. The stuck camera was definitely a way to make 3D games for a second, especially ones like this. And with them making a game like this, I see why they went with the way they did, and the camera angles they chose are fine, right? It's just, there is one or two places where you would go, oh man, I wish I could have controlled it. Or, oh man, I wish it had a wider screen. Or, I wish it had a wider view. But outside of that, I can't see any real issues with this game. So with that being said, let's move on to the final thoughts. So, does Devil May Cry 1 still hold up today? Absolutely. This is a great game to play. As I said in the video, I don't have to apologize for this one. This game feels as good as it did when it came out. Is it the best in the franchise? No. But it's still an amazing game, and I feel like if you can get your hands on it in any way, I'd recommend it. There's multiple ways to play this game, but I cannot recommend this one enough. With that being said, What's your favorite Devil May Cry game or Devil May Cry-like game? I love Devil May Cry, but Bayonetta is a close tie. I was gonna say second, but I can't decide. I love Bayonetta, but there's a whole bunch, like, you know, Dante's Inferno, and even the new Final Fantasy that takes after this one, so what's your favorite? Leave it in the comment section below, and I'll see you guys here next time on Nostalgia Goggles. Bye!